more than 30 years, a family has been searching for answers. Today, finally a breakthrough in the disappearance of Illawarra mother of three, Pauline Sowry. A man in his 60s, tonight behind bars.
It took 3 decades, but today police finally came knocking.
I'm Scott Nichols from Wollongong Detectives. Can you unlock the door for me?
A 64-year-old man marched out in handcuffs from his Wollongong flat, accused of being behind the disappearance of a mother of three. Pauline Sowry, also known as Pauline Lawrence, vanishing around Christmas in 1993.
This is a case that's gone for 30 years, and that's just a classic example that we'll never leave a case alone.
Pauline's son Jason in Perth this morning delivered the news he'd long been waiting for.
It's a great feeling. It's like the world's been lifted off my shoulders and that we're getting that one step closer to closure of Mum's disappearance and what's taken place.
In 2008, a coroner was convinced the then 49-year-old mother was dead. But why and where her body was, a mystery. That was until 3 years ago when the case was reopened. This Illawarra escarpment at Fig Tree then repeatedly searched. In March last year, a reward of $500,000 was offered for any information leading to a conviction.
Someone has heard something. Someone has been told something.
9 months later, clothes believed to be Pauline's unearthed. She would have been a grandmother of 5. Where she is now, the final piece of the tragic puzzle.
Closure for the family and I, just to know that where she is and what's taken place and how it's happened.
Hayley Francis, 9 News.
In May of 2025, police arrested a man they believed had carried a deadly secret for more than 3 decades. Detectives had secretly recorded him. They listened as he sat alone in his home, alone in his car, talking to himself. On those recordings, investigators claimed he revealed details that only someone connected to a murder could know. A murder that had haunted an Australian family since 1993. A mother vanished. 3 sons spent decades waiting for answers. 2 of those sons died before they ever got them. Then came the arrest, the breakthrough everyone thought would finally solve the mystery. And 8 months later, every charge disappeared. No trial, no explanation, no resolution, just more questions. Tonight, we're examining one of Australia's most frustrating cold cases, the disappearance of Pauline Sowry, and the investigation that seemed to crack the case open, only for it to collapse in stunning fashion. If you're fascinated by real cold cases where the truth remains just out of reach, consider subscribing, because this story proves that sometimes the hardest mysteries aren't the ones nobody can solve. They're the ones that seem solved, until suddenly they aren't. In late 1993, Pauline Sowry stood at a crossroads. She was 49 years old, a mother, a cat lover, someone who enjoyed music, family, and simple routines. Recently divorced, she was beginning a new chapter. The future wasn't entirely clear, but it was hers. Friends and family remember her as independent, strong, practical, the kind of woman who stayed connected to the people she loved. Most importantly, she was a devoted mother to her 3 sons, Paul, Jason, and Adam. Like many families, they weren't perfect, but they were close, and nothing about Pauline suggested she would simply disappear from their lives. Then, just before Christmas, something happened. Something that would alter the course of that family forever. Around Christmas of 1993, Pauline met one of her sons, Jason, for lunch. At the time, neither of them realized they were sharing their final conversation. The meeting felt ordinary. They discussed life, future plans, the challenges of divorce, possibilities that still lay ahead. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt alarming. No dramatic warning signs. No indication that danger was lurking just around the corner. When they said goodbye, Jason expected to see his mother again. Everyone did. But after that day, Pauline vanished. At first, her absence seemed temporary. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she'd gone somewhere unexpectedly. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The phone never rang. No letters arrived. No surprise visits. Nothing. The silence became impossible to ignore. And eventually, fear replaced hope. Because Pauline wasn't the kind of person who walked away from her children. Yet that's exactly what it looked like. Investigators began searching for signs of Pauline's movements. Bank accounts, travel records, medical facilities, government databases. Nothing. No financial activity. No official records. No confirmed sightings. It was as though she had stepped out of the world entirely. One report surfaced in 1994. Someone claimed to have seen Pauline riding in a pristine white Holden Kingswood. Police investigated, but they couldn't verify the information. The lead faded away, and with it went one of the last possible traces of Pauline. Years slipped by, then more years. The case grew colder. Files gathered dust. Witness memories faded. And still, there was no answer. For Pauline's sons, the uncertainty became its own kind of prison. Maybe she left voluntarily. Maybe she'd started a new life. Maybe she didn't want contact. Those possibilities hurt. But they were easier to accept than the alternative, because the alternative meant their mother was dead, and someone had gotten away with it. People often assume uncertainty becomes easier with time. But for many families of missing persons, the opposite is true. Every birthday becomes a question. Every holiday. Every family gathering. You never stop wondering. You never stop looking. And eventually the uncertainty begins to shape your entire life. That happened to Pauline's family. The years became decades. The waiting never ended. And the emotional cost was devastating. One son died, then another, both gone before learning what happened to their mother. Imagine carrying a mystery for decades. Imagine watching it destroy your family, piece by piece. Then imagine still waking up every morning without answers. That's the reality Jason faced, and still faces today. At this point in the story, many people would have given up. Jason didn't. If stories of persistence, cold cases, and families refusing to stop searching matter to you, subscribe now. Because what happens next would completely transform this investigation. And it begins with a witness who waited nearly 30 years to speak. In 2022, something changed. After decades of silence, police reopened the investigation with fresh determination. A specialized team began reviewing every detail, every report, every statement, every overlooked lead. Then a witness came forward. What they told investigators was extraordinary. The witness didn't simply offer a theory. They offered a location, a very specific location. According to the witness, Pauline had died there decades earlier. Detectives listened carefully. If the witness was telling the truth, this wasn't just another tip. This was potentially the biggest break in the entire case. Soon, police were heading into rugged bushland near Fig Tree, and they were preparing to dig. The terrain was difficult. Dense vegetation, steep slopes, years of natural growth covering whatever secrets might remain underneath. Detectives searched repeatedly, month after month, year after year. The operation became a test of patience. Then something appeared beneath the soil. Clothing. Old. Buried. Preserved by the earth for decades. Investigators carefully recovered every item. Among them was a blouse unlike any ordinary piece of evidence. It contained colorful hand stitching, a unique detail. One people close to Pauline immediately recognized. They believed she had sewn those designs herself. For the first time in decades, investigators held something tangible, something that seemed connected to Pauline. Something that suggested the witness might be telling the truth. But there was still a problem. A massive problem. The clothing had been buried for so long that forensic testing produced almost nothing. No DNA. No definitive breakthrough. No smoking gun. The evidence raised hope, but it couldn't solve the case. At least not by itself. And that's when investigators turned their attention elsewhere, toward a man they had quietly been watching for a very long time. Police believed someone knew more than they were saying. The question was how to prove it. Publicly, investigators announced a major reward. Privately, they launched something much more aggressive: surveillance, listening devices, monitoring. They wanted conversations, admissions, mistakes, anything. What happened next surprised even experienced detectives, because the most important conversations weren't happening with other people. They were happening when nobody else was around. A man in his 60s was allegedly speaking to himself, and police were listening. For weeks, then months. Investigators cataloged every word, every fragment, every reference. Some statements appeared deeply troubling. Others appeared potentially incriminating. Detectives believed the recordings placed him close to critical events connected to Pauline's disappearance. Eventually, they concluded they had enough. The operation moved to its next stage: an arrest. Before we get to what police believed they uncovered, pause for a moment and consider this. Would you trust a murder case built largely around words spoken by a man alone in a room? Keep that question in mind, because it becomes the center of everything that follows. In May 2025, officers arrived at a residence in Wollongong. The suspect was arrested. News spread quickly. For Pauline's surviving family members, it felt like the moment they'd waited decades to see. Finally. Movement. Progress. Possibly justice. Police alleged the man had knowledge of what happened after Pauline was killed. They claimed he had helped conceal critical information. Investigators also seized items they believed could be significant, including a vehicle linked to long-standing theories surrounding the case. For many observers, the arrest looked like the beginning of the end. The final chapter. The breakthrough that would deliver answers. But criminal investigations rarely follow straight lines. And this one was about to become far more complicated. From the very beginning, the defense pushed back. Hard. They argued the recordings could not be viewed in isolation. Context mattered. Mental health mattered. Interpretation mattered. The accused had a documented history of schizophrenia. Defense lawyers argued investigators were treating troubling statements as evidence of guilt, when they might instead reflect illness. The courtroom became a battleground over meaning. What did the recordings actually prove? What was fact? What was speculation? What was confession? And what was something else entirely? The questions multiplied. Months passed. The accused remained behind bars. Meanwhile, Pauline's family continued waiting. Again. Always waiting. Then came the moment nobody expected. After months in custody, after the headlines, after the public attention, after the hope, the prosecution withdrew everything. Every charge. Gone. No jury. No trial. No verdict. Just silence. The man at the center of the case walked free. The family was left stunned. The public was confused. And investigators who had spent years pursuing answers suddenly found themselves back where they started. without a prosecution, without closure, without justice. At least, not yet. For many viewers, this is the point where the story becomes truly heartbreaking. Not because there wasn't an arrest, but because there was. The family came within touching distance of answers, then watched them disappear again. If stories like this matter, help keep these cases visible by subscribing and sharing. Because sometimes public attention is the only thing keeping a cold case alive. Today, investigators still believe people know what happened. Someone knows where Pauline went. Someone knows how she died. Someone knows what happened after. The reward remains available. The investigation remains open. And despite decades passing, detectives have not stopped looking. But time is relentless. Memories fade. Witnesses age. Evidence disappears. Every year makes solving the mystery harder. Yet somehow this case refuses to die. Because unanswered questions have a way of haunting everyone connected to them, especially families, especially children, especially sons who spent their lives waiting for a mother who never came home. More than 30 years have passed since Pauline Sowry vanished. The woman who loved music, the woman who stitched colorful designs into her clothing, the woman who expected to celebrate future birthdays and family milestones, simply disappeared. Her grandchildren grew up without knowing her. Her sons spent decades searching. 2 of them never lived long enough to learn the truth. Today, one son remains, still waiting, still hoping, still asking the same question he asked all those years ago. What happened to my mother? There is something uniquely cruel about a case like this. In many murder investigations, families eventually receive something: a confession, a conviction, a grave to visit, a final chapter. Pauline's family received none of those things. Instead, they were left with uncertainty, and uncertainty can be its own form of punishment. For more than 3 decades, every major development brought fresh hope, then fresh disappointment. When investigators announced the discovery of clothing on the escarpment, many believed the mystery was finally beginning to unravel. When police announced an arrest, some thought justice was finally within reach. When charges were filed, people imagined a courtroom, evidence, witnesses, answers. But answers never came. And perhaps that's what makes this case so difficult to forget. The investigation produced fragments, pieces of a puzzle, a witness, a burial site, recovered clothing, covert recordings, a suspect, an arrest. Yet somehow those pieces never formed a complete picture. Imagine knowing that somewhere, another person may hold the missing piece. A memory, a conversation, a detail they have carried for decades. Something that could explain what happened to Pauline. Something that could finally allow a family to stop wondering. Detectives have repeatedly stated they believe people still know more than they have revealed. The passage of time doesn't erase knowledge. It only makes sharing it more urgent, because every year that passes creates a new risk. Witnesses grow older. Memories become harder to verify. Opportunities disappear. And cases that once seemed solvable slowly drift toward history. That reality is why investigators continue to appeal for information, not because they have given up, but because they haven't. They believe this story still has an ending. The question is whether someone will finally help write it. And if they do, it may be the last chance Pauline's family ever gets to hear the truth. For Jason, the fight has never been about revenge. It has never been about headlines. It has never been about public attention. It's about something much simpler. A son wanting to know what happened to his mother. A question that has followed him through decades of birthdays, holidays, funerals, and family milestones. A question that survived longer than many investigations ever do. And tonight, after more than 30 years, that question remains unanswered. Where is Pauline Sowry? Who took her from her family? And why has the truth remained hidden for so long? Somewhere, those answers exist. Someone knows them. And until they are spoken, this case will continue to haunt everyone connected to it. Because mysteries don't disappear with time. Sometimes they grow louder, waiting, demanding, refusing to be forgotten. Somewhere in Australia, someone almost certainly knows the answer. Whether that answer will ever be spoken aloud remains one of the country's most enduring mysteries. And until it is, the story of Pauline Sowry remains unfinished. If you have thoughts on this case, leave them below. Do you believe investigators were close to solving it? Or do you think the real truth is still hidden somewhere in the shadows? And if you're drawn to the mysteries that refuse to stay buried, subscribe for more true crime documentaries every week. Because sometimes the most haunting cases aren't the ones we've solved. They're the ones still waiting for someone to finally tell the truth.